Hey, how's it going guys? My name is Dom and today I'm going to be showing you how to build this JSON formatter right here using HTML, CSS and of course everybody's favorite language JavaScript. Okay, so this right here is going to be the finished product. As we can see, we have this JSON formatter. So I've included some poorly formatted JSON on the left side right there, and now if I was to press the format button, we're going to see that beautiful JSON format on the right side. I can also press on the Minify button to of course give us a minified version of that JSON. So this right here is really easy to create using pure JavaScript. No need for any sort of external libraries or frameworks. It's gonna all be done using pure/vanilla JavaScript. Okay, so heading inside this tab right here, we're gonna be beginning from scratch to create what I just showed you, and also the source code for this is going to be linked down below if you would like to download it and follow along while you watch today's video. All right, so going inside the text editor right here, we have this index HTML. So hopefully you're going to have something similar on your end. Now, the very first step here is going to be to create a couple of files. All right, so going on the left side right here, let's make a new directory called src, short for source, and then going inside here, let's make a new file called main.css and also one for the JavaScript being a new file, main.js. So now let's include both of these files inside your HTML by going inside the head here. We're going to make a link to a CSS file, of course, going to our src/main.css. Let's do the exact same thing now for the JavaScript right down below. Script source going to src/main.js, and also it's important to include the defer attribute here because this just means that the JavaScript code inside this file is only going to be executed once the document has fully loaded up. All right, so we've included both our CSS and our JavaScript file. We can move on to coding up the HTML. All right, so when it comes to the HTML for this JSON formatter, we're going to need a main container. So let's go down here, make a new div called container. Inside this container, we're going to need 3 columns inside a grid because of course we're going to be covering CSS Grid in today's video as well. So when it comes to our grid, our 3-column layout here, we're going to need of course the main input on the left side, the middle section for controls, and of course the right side for the output. So that being said, let's make a new text area here, and this will be our main input on the left side. So when it comes to this text area right here, we're going to give this a class of large-area and a second class called large-area. Then we can just say --input just to signify this right here is going to be the input section as opposed to the output section. So now we can also give this a simple placeholder. And we can just say something like, enter your JSON here. Okay, so now we can simply duplicate this line and this will be our output. So now let's change this to simply say output instead of input on the class right here. And for the placeholder, we can just say something like, let's just do something like your JSON will appear here, something like that. Okay, cool. So now I'll just zoom out one notch there. Now, dropping into the center of these 2 text areas, we're going to need a main container for all of the controls, so the format and the Minify button. So for this, let's make a new div called controls. Now, or have a class of controls here. Inside this div, let's make a new button with a class of controls__button. Okay, now, let's add a second class here. So copy this once again. We can say --format because this one here is going to be the format button. Okay. You're going to also want to include here a type of button to ensure that if for whatever reason this right here is inside a form, the form is not going to be submitted by default when clicking on the button. Okay, cool. Inside the button text, let's just say something like format and keep it relatively straightforward. let's copy this line and make a second one here for Minify. So change this text to be Minify, and of course change your class to also be Minify. So this right here is all of the HTML for your JSON formatter. Now, I do encourage you to go inside your text area for the input here and just put some sample JSON. For example, we can say something like name and make this say DOM, just so we can easily test the functionality without having to constantly paste JSON into it. Okay, cool. So now if I save this right here and go inside the browser, we have something like this. Okay, so of course, this right here is now gonna need some CSS to make it look something like this. So going back inside the text editor and inside the main.css file, we're gonna begin by targeting the body. We're going to assign a margin of 0 to remove the default space around the edges of your browser window. Also a background here of 333 for dark gray. I know many of you guys have asked me in the comments to make my videos a darker shade because of viewing ease or ease of viewing. So there we go. I listened to you guys. Next up, we have a class of container to be targeted by CSS. We're going to give this a display of grid. Okay. Now, alongside this display of grid, we're going to be specifying what the grid is going to look like. So we want to create a 3-column layout. Of course, the input, the controls, and then of course the output on the right side. So to achieve this, we can just say grid template columns, and then we can specify each column here and how much space it's going to take up. So we can say 1FR for the left column, 100 pixels for the middle section, and of course 1FR for the right side. So what does this 1FR mean? What does this 1FR mean? 1FR means one of the free or available space. So really, if you have 2 1FRs on each side here, it just means create 2 evenly spaced columns taking up the remaining space, minus the 100px in the middle. Okay, so now if I save this and go back in the browser, we have this right here. We have our 2 perfectly even text areas, then of course the middle section here of 100 pixels right there. So that is our basic layout for the JSON formatter. So moving on with the CSS, we can also apply and align items here of center alongside a height of 100 VH. So this right here is going to make sure that the content inside the container is going to take up 100% of the vertical height on the actual browser viewing area. Okay. Alongside that, the align items of center is going to vertically center your HTML elements. So going back inside here, we get something like this: a 100% height grid with vertically centered text area and buttons, things like that. Okay, so now going inside the text editor once again, let's just set a box sizing here of border box, as well as a padding of 20px and a gap of 20px. This right here is going to add 20px of padding around the entire container and 20px of gap between every single text area and the middle column, things like that. So going back in the browser, we get something like this. So now, how do we make these text areas, full size? Well, to achieve that, going back inside the text editor, let's target the class of large-area. Remember, this large area refers to both the input text area and the output text area right down here. So targeting these, we can simply specify first off a height of 100% to ensure that they're going to take up the entire remaining height that they have access to right there. Okay. We can also apply here a padding of something like 20px to, of course, create some space between the text and the edges. We can give this a box sizing of border box to ensure that, of course, your padding does not increase the entire width and height of the text area. Okay, let's apply a text color of a very light gray right there, as well as a background of a darker gray, 44444, and of course 4, as well as a border of none and a border radius here of 10px. Let's save this, go back in the browser, and we get something like this. As we can see, we've got a lot of space here, which probably was there before, to be honest, but I might as well explain it now. This space you're seeing here just basically comes from the fact that you've got space in your HTML itself, okay? So that's where that comes from, because of course your text area is displaying content. It's not actually a value in the same way an input value is. So that is where the space is coming from, okay? Cool. We've got just our light gray, of course, our borders and things like that. So let's go back in the text editor right here and apply an outline of none to remove that default outline when focusing on the text area. Now, this right here is going to be replaced with some more effects later on, so don't worry, as well as a resize of none. This will ensure that your text area cannot be resized. It's important to also include a font family here of monospace just to remove, or not to remove, but to ensure that your text area is going to display, monospace or coding font. Okay, so going back in the browser, it's going to look no different because of course that's the default, but just to ensure you get that monospace font across all systems, make sure to include that right there. So now we're basically done with the text area. Now, one last thing here is going to be a transition of background at 0.25 seconds and also the text color at 0.25 seconds. So this right here is going to make sure that when we hover over the text area and the background changes, it's going to change with a nice smooth transition. So speaking of that, let's copy the class and drop it down here. We're going to say when you hover over the text area, and also when you actually are focused on the text area. In fact, my mistake. This needs to be a focus class. So when you hover and you focus on the text area, we're going to be changing the background color. We're going to say background at 4A. So 4A, and then 4A. This right here is going to be a lighter gray. If I save this and go back in the browser, we get something like this when hovering over the text area, as well as when it's active. Okay, cool. Well, we're going to also need to copy the focus selector right here and just change the text color to be a lighter gray. We can make this EEE, save this back in the browser, and of course we get that light gray, or that lighter gray when you are hovering over or when you are actively working on the text area itself. Okay, cool. So we're almost there. I'm sort of running out of breath a bit. That's all right. Let's just try and calm down here, and we can move on to all of the buttons in the middle here. All right. So when it comes to those center control buttons, we can simply target the class of control or controls _ buttons. So for these buttons right here, you can make these look however you like, of course, but I'm going to be applying here a padding of 8px top and bottom, and then 14px for the left and right. Okay. Also a width of 100%, just to of course make them look a lot wider than they originally would be, as well as a margin bottom here of 10px and a border radius of 5 pixels. I can save this and go back in the browser, and we of course get that right there. Okay, so going back inside the text editor, moving on, we can also apply a border of none and an outline of none to our buttons here, as well as a cursor of pointer. Now, we're also going to be applying here a background of 009578. That is the classic dcode green color, as well as a text color of white against that background, all right? We can also lastly apply a font weight of bold to, of course, make the font bold, all right? We can save this and go back inside the browser, and we get something like this. So looking not too bad so far. Moving on to the very last bit of CSS is going to be to simply target the button whenever the user is actually pressing on it. So we can target the active class on the button right here, and we can simply apply a darker shade of the green, which we used for the normal background color. This is going to be 007 and then 05A in my case. I can save this and go back in the browser, and if I was to click on the button, we get that darker shade of green right there. So that is all of the CSS for your JSON formatter. Okay, so I realized I wasn't actually centered in the camera, but that's okay. I am now, hopefully. So we can move on to the JavaScript in today's video, the main part, okay? So when it comes to the JavaScript for the JSON formatter, we can go inside the main.js. So we're going to be declaring 4 constants at the top of this file to represent all of our 4 HTML elements which we care about. Things like the buttons and of course the input and the output text area. So going inside the JavaScript right here, let's make a new constant called input area equal to document.querySelector, and we're going to be selecting here, of course, the class of large-input input. Actually, this needs to be large-area, my mistake, but of course this right here is simply going to reference or select your input area, text area in the JavaScript. Okay, cool. Moving on, we can duplicate this line right here using Shift-Alt down for you guys who didn't know, and we can name this one output area. Of course, this one's going to say output as your class name. So selecting both our text areas right there in the JavaScript. Okay, cool. Now we can move on down and we can make a new one here called btn format. This here, of course, is meant to be the button to format the JSON. So here it's going to have a class of controls __ button -- format. The exact same thing down below for the btn minify. And we basically good to go. So we have all of our 4 HTML elements referenced inside the JavaScript. So now it's going to be really straightforward. We're going to be we're going to be starting with the format button. So we're going to say btn format.addEventListener. When the user wants to click on the format button, we're going to run this function inside here. So this function is going to simply take the input, it's going to format it as a string, and then insert that string into the text area on the right side. Really straightforward. So let's make a new constant called formatted. This right here is it's gonna be the formatted JSON. Okay, it's gonna have a value equal to JSON.stringify. So of course, using the stringify method on the JSON object here is gonna take a native JavaScript object or array and then convert it into a JSON string. Now, this right here, when it comes to making your JSON look formatted, it's going to take in 3 arguments. The first one, of course, is going to be the JSON itself. So for now, let's make this an empty object just to, see what this thing's going to look like. So we're going to replace this very shortly, but for now, let's keep it right there. The second argument for this stringify here is going to be null. And the third one is going to be how many spaces for your, formatted JSON. In this case here, I want to use 4 spaces, per indentation. So this will give you your nicely formatted JSON. So let's replace this empty string here, or empty object, should I say, with the user's actual input. So to take the user's input and convert it into a JavaScript object, it's going to be really straightforward. It's going to be json.parse, then just say input area.value. So we're converting our JSON into a native JavaScript object with this json.parse. Then we're simply reconverting it back to JSON using json.stringify right here. Now we can simply just say output area.value equal to the newly formatted value. I can save this and go back in the browser, click on the format button, and we get the neatly formatted JSON right there on the right side. Now, I forgot to mention that you also would want to make your second text area right down here a read only. So you can just say read only on the HTML right there to ensure the user can't actually, select and edit this text. Of course, they could if they were to remove this attribute in your inspector console, but just for general ease of use, they can not modify the right side. Cool. Moving on to the Minify button. So let's duplicate all of that code right there. Change this to be btn minify. Then, of course, change this formatted to instead be something like minified. Okay, up to you, right? Now, this JSON.stringify and this JSON parse is going to stay the same, but the arguments here are going to be removed because by default, when you call JSON.stringify, it is going to minify your JSON. Okay, so that's a default behavior. So now it's going to take the JSON, minify, and that's it. And we're done. So I can save this, go back in the browser, press on the minify button. It's going to minify my JSON right there. So it is working perfectly fine. And that is how to create a JSON formatter using HTML, CSS, and of course, JavaScript. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.